Thanks for this, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Spilled it all over myself already, but
Perfect.
That's what we do with light-colored shirts, is we spill all over it and ruin it almost immediately.
that's the point, I guess.
I'm going to keep this one clean, though.
I'm going to throw coffee on that shirt. No, I really don't care. I'm not an NBA fan anymore. I'm happy for you guys that you won it all. I hope my Blazers fans can win it all at some point.
Did you have a team back in the day?
I had a team all the way up until 2006. I was a Dallas Mavericks fan, but then I watched the league completely rig that finals, which, no, I'm not just saying that from a sour grapes perspective. Guys like Bill Simmons still talk about it all these years later. But I also lived in Oregon for a short period of time, so I know an inordinate amount of Blazers fans who have rooted hard for that franchise over the years. I liked Damian Lillard when he was with you guys. I thought he was one of the most exciting players in the league. But, when did you start loving the Portland Trail Blazers?
That's a good question. My first connection with the Portland Trail Blazers was in 5th grade. I broke both. We just moved to the United States. It was like 6 months in to our time in America.
Moved from?
India.
Okay.
And I broke both my arms at a bike safety class, funny enough.
Bike safety, ironic.
Yeah, there was like a bike safety class. I was 6'2" at that point, probably, in 5th grade, and they put me on a 5th grade bicycle.
Sorry, did you say you were 6'2" in 5th grade?
I was 6'2" in 5th grade.
Wow.
But they put me on what was a normal-sized bicycle for a 5th grader. I was riding. My feet hit the ground. I went flying over the handlebars. It was not like the proper size. Ironic, considering it was a bike safety class and they put me in a bike too small. But I broke both my arms at the same time. And I remember getting casts. And when we were getting my cast, we were like, what colors do you want? And my dad was with me. And he was like, well, what about the Portland Trail Blazers colors? Why don't you get them black and red? And that was kind of my first real connection to the Portland Trail Blazers.
You're a 6'2" 5th grader.
Yeah.
You just broke both your arms. Did that inhibit your basketball recruitment? I've got to imagine that everybody on the playground was like, I got Arjav.
Yeah, it definitely helped. The problem was I wasn't based on what I just shared with you. It's clear I wasn't the most coordinated 6'2" person in 5th grade. I was kind of still growing into my body at that point. People loved the idea of me, but you put me 2 feet from a basketball hoop in 5th grade, and you would have been lucky if the ball went in.
Wow.
When did that growth spurt happen?
4th grade.
Okay.
Yeah,
so you went from a normal-sized kid to all of a sudden towering over everybody else.
You look at my mom always jokes, like all my elementary school photos, it's like a bunch of like regular-sized kids and like one pole in the back.
Yeah.
Luckily, I've equalized now that I'm an adult, but I'm still relatively tall. I'm 6'4", but I'm not what I projected I would be.
Yeah.
I was a 6'2" 5th grader.
6'2" at 5th grade, people assume you're going to be another 7-footer.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I told Trey I was interested to learn about you, and just so everybody knows, we're here at Birdie's today. Arjav Ezekiel, owner and beverage director, owns this wonderful, highly recognized restaurant on East 12th with his wife, Tracy, recent recipient of the James Beard Award for Outstanding Beverage Professional. He's essentially the SGA of the wine world right now.
Congrats on that.
But I was telling Trey, I was very interested to know, obviously we talk about sports and restaurants. What was your sport? Did you have a sport growing up? What was the thing that, obviously watching basketball, I know you're a big Trailblazers fan, but was that the sport you played, or did you play cricket? Were you a cricket player? I played cricket a little bit, but tennis was my sport.
Tennis. Yeah, I played tennis from the time I was probably 7.
Okay.
Played tennis in high school. I played a little bit in college. But tennis was my sport.
Nice.
Tennis was my sport. I burned out of tennis. I got kind of serious about it for 2 years, and then I was like, this is just the amount of repetition and hours it takes. It just eventually kind of robbed me of the fun aspect of tennis. So I slowed down. I picked up pickleball last year, and I played for about 8 months straight every single day with Fiore Tedesco, Locodoro.
Yeah.
We played every morning for about 8 months, which was great. And then Fiore got pulled into Bambino right after it opened. But Basketball was something I picked up because of my love for watching the game.
Yeah.
And I played 1 year in high school. But I, to this day, think it's like the most beautiful sport in a lot of ways, because I think, and there's a lot of translation to hospitality. I talk a lot about this with our team. One of my favorite teams of all time were the Spurs during the Boris Diaw, Ginobili era, where, you know, it was kind of like the beautiful game era of the sport, where it was about the team and not about the individual. It was about making the right reads. It's kind of like the Jack Ramsey Trailblazers in '77 when we won. But to me, hospitality kind of embodies some of that spirit. We have a little sign at the front door that says hospitality is a team sport, because we really believe it, you know. And I think we always talk about what we do in hospitality, especially in the dining room and in the kitchen, actually, like, and collectively as a team. We never talk about this restaurant as a family. I find that verbiage can be
problematic.
But to me, like, great teams are able to perform at a really high level. We always talk about building championship teams, and that means finding the right pieces, understanding what your role is on the team, right? Like, not everybody can do everything. So we talk about specialists being specialized versus being generalized.
Yeah.
Both those skill sets are really, really important. You know, an example of that at our restaurant is the person who works at the counter.
Yep.
That's a very specialized role.
Right.
Right? Like, that's something that you can only get good at through reps. And there's a couple of people who do that 80% of the time.
Yeah. So just for context, everybody that's listening and watching on YouTube, Birdie's is a counter service model, which was very unique when you opened. You've seen it kind of grow around more in terms of it's a higher end or finer dining experience, but you're in line, you go up, you place your order, and then the entire experience begins really at that moment when you walk in and wait in line. No reservations. And talk a little bit about, you know, the decision behind that. What in your background, or how did you guys evolve into recognizing that as a way to run a restaurant?
Well, I want to acknowledge it was a risk.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that a little bit before we opened. We're like, well, no one's really quite doing that, but it makes sense. I think a few years removed now from the pandemic, I think it's hard now to kind of look back at that era and really, we're still kind of unpacking what that era meant for our industry, right? And I think it's hard to overstate how many decisions were made because of our feeling that, like, everybody was going to reset. Like, there was a kind of a collective discussion in restaurants nationally about the Great Reset. I think that's what a lot of people were calling it. I don't think that reset really ever happened, but I think there was this collective understanding that the restaurant model as it exists today does not work for most people. And we asked ourselves, why do all this work if it's going to make us miserable? Because so many people told us, don't do it. Don't open a restaurant. It's not that much fun. And we had spent our entire career kind of committed, dedicated to the craft of restaurants. And we'd gotten to a point, 15, 20, Tracy had been cooking 20 years at that point. I'd been on the dining room floor like 13 years. And it was like, we are now at a place where we have built enough foundational knowledge to kind of explore what our own voice is going to be, right? And I think as we were kind of parsing through that, we asked ourselves some big questions about the life we wanted to live. And I think, you know, for us, it was like, what do we want out of this restaurant? Well, we would like a sustainable life. We'd like to make a living off of this restaurant. We'd like to be able to start a family. We'd like to have a couple days off every week. We would like to be able to have a summer vacation and spend the holidays with our family. And then we started talking about it, and we're like, well, if we want this, wouldn't everybody who works for us also kind of want and expect that? Because, you know, for us, like, servant leadership's really important. Like, Tracy and I are still here every single day. But it felt disconnected to say, well, we're going to take this because we've earned the right or whatever, because we own the restaurant. But we're not going to share this with our team. So we made a collective decision to be closed to way more than I think Brian would have advised, or probably still advises. But it was important for us to set the tone and say, these are our principles. This is what we stand for. Let's try and make it work. If it doesn't work, we can always change. But I didn't want to start this restaurant from a place of kind of compromised principles. And part of how we figured we could like kind of allow that to happen is kind of reduce the labor force a little bit. We wanted to build a strong, mighty, but lean team. So, you know, we, on our busiest nights, I think we did 190 plus covers with like 17 people at the restaurant. I think for anybody who's been in restaurants, that's kind of a remarkable thing, you know?
Yeah. I misplaced you, if in my metaphor. You're not SGA, you're Sam Presti.
Yeah.
You had a plan, you built a team, you've executed the team, and obviously you've been recognized for those efforts.
Well, and a lot of those founding principles that y'all are operating on run counter to what is almost expected in the restaurant world.
Yeah.
Days off? You kidding me? Holidays off? Absolutely not. A sustainable life, one that allows you to live a moderately comfortable lifestyle. Yeah, good luck with that in a lot of instances. And so, as you said, that may not have been advised by those who understand what this world is all about. But was there a point where you realized that not only was this a decent idea, but there were a lot of people on board with trying to operate like this too?
When you say on board with trying to operate, you mean on the guest side or kind of operator side?
On the employee side, on the team side.
I think the team has always kind of enjoyed it. I think it's made for, I think the challenge with like an experience like this is like, how do you avoid something like this feeling transactional, right? Like I think to me, and this is, I'm incredibly biased, but I think our team provides the best hospitality. I would put us up against any restaurant in the country. I really believe that. I think the people who show up at this restaurant and put their heart and soul into this restaurant really care about taking care of people. What we've decided to compromise a little bit on is service. And then we think of those two things as kind of different pieces of this, you know, or different sides of the same coin.
Because service is part of customer service, but you're saying those two things are a little bit separate here.
Well, we talk about service and hospitality as two disparate things, right? Service to us is the mechanical aspect of the job. It's what is expected from you. And we talk about that in terms of like clearing tables, getting people water, getting the people the food on time, and like, you know, and serving it hot. It's a really important piece of any restaurant. But, you know, this is kind of a Danny Meyerism, but we've kind of broken them into two different grades. 49% of the job is the service, 51% is the hospitality. And both by themselves are failing grades, right? But you need the right combination of the two of them to kind of bring a restaurant to life. And the most important thing for us was we knew counter service would be polarizing, right? Like I think it's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to wait in line and then sit down and have a 90-minute meal. But we made an effort to focus on the people who showed up every single day, our guests, to make them feel connected to this restaurant because we felt genuinely connected to them. And I think it's not unlike the Cheers analogy. Like you go back to the places that you feel most connected to. I don't go back to restaurants just because of the food. The food is a piece of it. But I go back because I'm like, you know, I brought my kid and they were so kind to my kid. Or I went into this restaurant and I was celebrating my 28th anniversary and they acknowledged it with like a splash of champagne and a fun little 20-year port at the end of my meal. I think those are the moments that I think all of us live for in hospitality. It's kind of why I fell in love with the industry. And I think that's kind of where we're always pushing this restaurant to get better at.
Well, you can obviously hire people who either have a natural or learned understanding for hospitality, but is there anything that you do to help nurture that process along? Because it sounds like even if they come in as being pretty good at it to begin with, there is something extra that goes into making sure that you're fitting in properly with the Birdie's team.
I mean, I think that's something we've learned over the years. We're very lucky. I think we have, you know, our executive Sue has been with us since the opening. Shout out to Hijay. And we've been open just under 4 years. We'll be 4 years old next month. And we have a good 40% of our dining room has been here over 3 years. I think that connective tissue and continuity is a lot. And I think the people who've been here for that long are the collective memory of this restaurant in a lot of ways, right? Like, I think they are the culture of this restaurant. They are the people that transmit that knowledge to the next generation, or the people who are just starting. We have a couple people who started over the last couple of months and have kind of seamlessly integrated into the restaurant. But we pay a lot of attention to the hiring process to make sure we hire the right fit. And one thing we've learned is fit is more important than the technical skill. We can teach you the technical skill. We can't teach you the hospitality piece. It's actually the other way around, where, you know, people who come in with a ton of experience tend not to always be the best fit. We find we've had the most success from people who've maybe had backgrounds in coffee or casual restaurants, and we can kind of bring them up into our world because they're in a stage of their life where they're like, okay, I'm in my mid-20s. This is the path I'm choosing. I want to find ways to grow my wine knowledge and my hospitality and food knowledge. Those are the people we find do best here.
Well, and that brings up a question that I was thinking about. The technical skill, right? I mean, you've been recognized for your beverage program. Where did your technical skills grow? Who are your, either inspiration or leaders or teachers or coaches? And then how do any of those programs show up here at Birdie's?
It's a good question. I've been reflecting on this a little bit since the award, just kind of thinking about my path to getting here over the last 15 years. And I think, I guess there are two pieces to it, right? I think, to me, beverage is just one vocabulary in restaurants. I think hospitality is the thing we live in, right? It's the thing that I am the most passionate about. Beverage just happens to be one way I can share that love of hospitality with people, but it's not the thing that wakes me up in the morning. Right?
Okay.
I had the second job I ever had. I worked with a guy named Kyle Wilson, who to this day is the greatest hospitality person no one knows about. But we worked together at this restaurant called Communal in DC, and Kyle had this like incredible ability to show empathy and connect with people. And I modeled a lot of the way I have conversations around wine, service, our approach, quite frankly, from Kyle, because I think he embodied the best of what it means to be in this industry. So he was a peer and a mentor and someone I admired. He's no longer in restaurants, which is actually the most tragic thing to me. But I think Kyle had a outsized impact on why I'm still in this industry today. And then when I moved to New York to help open Untitled, that's kind of when my wine journey really began. One of my dear friends, Eduardo Portocarrero, who's now the wine director for all the Ford Fry restaurants in Atlanta.
Oh, yeah.
He was instrumental in kind of teaching me vocabulary around wine and how to talk about wine and how wine is about, at the end of the day, great farming and great people. And all we're trying to do is be the connective tissue between the farm and the guest and share the stories of the people to the people actually drinking the wine. You know, I don't go to a restaurant necessarily to like when I always think about selling wine from the perspective of what happens if mom and dad are here, right? Like, how do they enjoy a restaurant? They don't know much about wine, and they don't necessarily want to spend a ton of money on wine. And you got to build wine programs that accommodate the entire spectrum, I think, of what people want to drink, while having a clear voice about what you're trying to say that is important in wine. And I think one of the things we've really kind of gotten to right now is like we have a huge non-alcoholic list. We have, it's I think one of the largest in the country. I think we've got like a pretty deep wine list where you can spend, $48 on a bottle, spend $2,200 on a bottle, but kind of depends where in your life you are and like where in your week you are. It's like, are you out celebrating at Birdie's and you're celebrating the close of a big deal and you're part of a big law firm in the city, or are you just out celebrating life with your partner because it's the first weekend you've had off together in a month because you just had a new kid? I think those are two different things, and our approaches have to match that. We teach that a lot. I think one of the things we talk about a lot at this restaurant is distilling. So an example of that would be someone walks into the restaurant and they say, I like full-bodied wines like Pinot Noir and Beaujolais. Now you could tell them, well, Pinot Noir is not a full-bodied wine, or Gamay is not a full-bodied wine, or you could ask more questions. And I think our approach to hospitality has always been about ask more questions and be active listeners. So it sounds like what you're saying is that you really enjoy Pinot Noir and Gamay. What do you like about those wines? Or can you give me an example of a wine that you've had recently that you really enjoyed? And they'll say, well, I really like the Oregon Pinot because it's fruited. So I'm like, okay, so you like Oregon Pinot, which means you'll probably enjoy Burgundy. Where else can I go with this? Maybe there's some Gamay that we can bring in that's like fuller bodied, So the next question is, okay, is there a price point you'd like to be at? And then they'll say, well, I don't want to spend more than about $80. And then it's like, okay, we don't have any Pinot from Oregon in that price anymore. It's not like 2012. We don't have Burgundy in that price point. Where in America can I go? Oh, cool. We have this incredible wine from Santa Barbara that Raj Par makes. Or, maybe we go and say, hey, are you open for a little more adventure? It's like maybe a little different than what you're used to, but what about Grenache?
With all this curiosity, you need to shave that beard and just go to the mustache. You sound like Ted Lasso.
No, I think
no, but it's right. No,
Ted Lasso embodies hospitality.
Yes, he
right?
does.
Like
he
he
does.
understands what makes people tick.
Yep.
And I think
no, I mean it as a great thing. Like
Yeah.
I think that it is the difference maker to show genuine interest and curiosity around a guest and their experience, and then trying and matching it.
Real quick, because you said that people can get a $48 bottle of wine here or a $2,200 bottle of wine. Other than the cost, obviously, what separates those two wines?
there's probably 2 or 3 things that separate them. One is like supply and demand. It's like kind of singular, kind of basic economics. The other piece is the quality of the producer, and how sought after. I mean, like it's kind of going into the demand piece again, but like how sought after something is, how culty something is.
So it's value driven by something other than the actual quality of the product.
I think you could drink quality across the spectrum, but within the separator between the very good and the great, that's when the prices start jumping. You can drink incredibly well at this time in our life, especially for, $80.
Yeah,
like at
totally.
a restaurant. You should be able to do that still. At about $150, like I think it becomes about the name on the label, which often corresponds to quality, but not always. And then I think once you're breaching the like $800, $900, $1,000, you're talking about Burgundy usually, or Bordeaux, small production, artisanal is like, I think maybe the best way to think about it, that also have a ton of people wanting that wine. So probably the easiest example is Domaine de la Romane Conti, right?
Yep.
DRC. I think last year we got 1 bottle offered to us. A lot of people argue it's the greatest wine in the world. I don't know if I agree with that, but like for a lot of people it is.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people it's worth that splurge. The person who drank it last year was someone who was a regular of ours, who was celebrating their friend's birthday. They're wine people. And it was a special occasion wine for them because it's probably the only time that year they drank that wine.
Trey, to bring it into maybe a context you'll understand, Arch Manning is like a $250 bottle, and depending after next season, he could be a $2,500 bottle.
There you go.
But right now, it's name, image, and likeness that is of value. We'll see what he does on the field.
I would argue that the value is probably a little bit higher right now, perhaps a little bit inflated
There you go.
by the name, but
We'll
maybe
see what the vintage is. I mean, he's played.
the quality matches the price points by season's end, right?
We'll see. That's why we drink it, right? To judge. So
So all of this knowledge speaks to you just being honored with the James Beard Award in Chicago, a city that I lived in. We may have to
cool.
talk a little bit more about your experience
Great
there
city.
leading up to the award. Great city, great food city too, maybe underrated food city. What was that like for you to hear your name called and to go up on stage to give thanks for something that is looked at so prestigiously in the world of the culinary arts?
Well, it was overwhelming. I blacked out, I think, a good chunk of that evening. You know, just like when something like that happens, you kind of just get like singular. I was like, I'm so glad I prepared a speech. But I think it was like an incredible evening to be surrounded by people you've looked up to. Danny Meyer was in the audience. He's like one of the people like I've looked up to my entire career. You know, there was the room was full of people who you've kind of looked up to, and to be in their company was a really special thing. I think there were a couple of things that I think were really important to me that I've kind of like absorbed kind of through reflection now, a week and a half removed from the actual awards. One is it was a really, I think, big deal for the city and the state. My understanding, June Rodil told me this at the award ceremony, that this was the first time anyone in Texas had won a beverage award, which, considering how special I think the beverage scene is, I think Austin in particular gets kind of pigeoned into like an agave city or like a brown spirit city. But I think one of the remarkable things, and I give June Rodil so much credit for this, but she made this city a wine city too. And I think Stephen Dilly, Rania Zayat, there's like a host of people who've made this city an incredible wine city that have allowed a restaurateur like me to be successful, you know? And I think it's a wonderful thing for this city. And I hope all the wine people who've made this city drink like a really special place to drink wine now can celebrate in that win, because I truly believe that win is shared with all of them. You know, it's not possible without any of them.
And it's something that the city will continue to benefit from, because for the longest time when I was in the wine world and managing restaurants, you know, these allocations and some of these wines, I mean, they don't make it off the coasts. They didn't make it to Texas for years. Yeah. Or if they did, they stayed in Houston or Dallas, because that's where the, you know, whatever, economically speaking, they could make a list and actually move. It's taken a long time and a lot of people in the Austin wine world to build up this kind of foundation. And I think it's kind of you to say, but it is true. It's, you know, you've now kind of put some walls on that foundation and said, yeah, no, this is a place to drink good wine and good beverages in general, you know, non-alcoholic, all those things. It all builds on itself. So it's exciting to see. And more importantly, you know, I'm sure it was tough. You know, I mean, your wife had a Beard Award already. So, you know, at least now you're tied up with her.
No, it was a really special evening. It was also like it's interesting. The Beard Foundation this year, it was a brand new category. They added like 3 new categories, all in the beverage space this year. And my hope is they continue to like pay attention to what's happening in the dining room. I think the Beard Awards have been so focused on the kitchen, outside of like the Outstanding Wine program every year and Outstanding Hospitality. It's been primarily a chef award, but I think restaurants at their best connect to guests, and I think the connective tissue between the kitchen and the guest has always been the dining room. And there's an art and a craft to that work. And I think over the next decade, I think we can maybe talk about this a little bit, with AI kind of coming in and it's going to disrupt so many pieces of our economy. I truly believe restaurants are going to be the last thing that's going to be affected by it. Like, I think the work's going to be the same, and the back end's going to get a little bit easier with some of this technology. But I think restaurants, especially with remote work, et cetera, they're going to end up becoming hubs for community. I think they're going to become hubs for connection, like real human connection, because I think those things are getting farther and farther away. Bowling leagues are a great example. Like in the 60s, bowling leagues were a huge piece of community, especially in rural parts of the country. And as that has kind of got, there's a great book by Robert Putnam called Bowling Alone. It talks a little bit about how part of this cleft we've seen in society has come from the disappearance of bowling leagues, of churches, of these institutions, not necessarily religious, but institutions that brought community together.
Yep.
I think what we've seen is restaurants have started to occupy that space now.
No doubt. How is your bowling?
My bowling?
Yeah, you a decent bowler?
I like to think I'm a better bowler than I am.
Okay.
I have good days and bad days.
Okay.
But I quite enjoy it.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I say that my dad gave me the all the redneck genes.
Yeah.
So like I can throw a dart, I can play pool, I can bowl.
Good genes
You like-
to have.
Yeah.
Jumping off of high places into water recklessly.
Yep. I can
That's
do
one of
that.
my rednecky qualities.
Yep, I can do that. I saw some people in Oklahoma City jumping into the canal
There you
after
go.
the title. So yeah, I mean, redneck. Maybe it's not redneck. Maybe it's more. I don't know. But like you said, I mean, those community spaces are important to have, and they do evolve and change. And I totally agree with you. I think restaurants, specifically ones that you feel comfortable in, that you have connections with. It's incredible what can happen at a restaurant. You never know who's sitting next to you, and especially in this town where, I mean, I've just met and seen so many connections happen in restaurants that are so fun, that really do change people's lives just because they were having a good time, being open and making eye contact, having a good, all those things are really, really cool.
My favorite thing that happens at this restaurant, especially because we're counter service, is when we have lines, people will make friends in line, and they come in as like a 2-top, but end up sitting down as a 6-top, and like breaking bread together and becoming real friends, which is, and it's remarkable how much that happens here, which gives you a great hope for humanity.
I was going to say, lines aren't a bad thing in Austin. There are lots of lines, and sometimes they can be a lot of fun.
I think a lot of good things happen when you put yourselves in uncomfortable positions, and I think you're going to wait at any restaurant that you walk into, usually in like a lounge or a bar area. So for us, it's like you're going to wait 30 minutes, but you might wait 30 minutes in line instead, and you can have a bottle of wine while you wait.
Part of what makes the Franklin barbecue experience so special is you're sitting there tailgating with your friends, your family, and complete strangers as you guys wait to eat delicious food. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you just mentioned what is essentially the communal table concept, because one of my, I'll just go ahead and call it my favorite restaurant on the planet, is Avec in Chicago.
Great restaurant.
And that is partially because there is very much a communal element there. And that's not something I had ever really experienced before eating there. And over time, going back there over and over again with my girlfriend and fiance and now wife and mother of my children, there were so many great experiences that we had as a result of sitting next to 2 complete strangers, asking them what it is that they ordered, or maybe somebody sitting down next to us asking us the same question, and just gradually chatting it up and doing what humans have throughout history to help us evolve. And that's sharing meals and sharing ideas and loves and maybe things that bother us, and finding solutions to these things, all while breaking that figurative or sometimes literal bread. So I bring Avec up because I did want to ask you, I assume you were in Chicago for at least a couple of days. What are some of the meals that you had while in Chi-Town that stick out?
Man, great! What a great food city. Before I'll talk about this year, but I just want to shout out Avec real quick, because I do think that restaurant is incredibly special.
They do a version of what you guys are doing here too.
I mean, they were the original cool restaurant. You know what I mean? I think Momofuku Sambar, there's like connective tissue, I think, between Avec to Momofuku Sambar to like us in some ways. But I'd never eaten there till last year when we went for Tracy's beard nomination. And I walked into that space and I was like, man, I can't believe this restaurant is like 20 years old.
Yeah.
Because it is still so freaking cool. It's like a cool, really cool restaurant still. And food was awesome. Vibe was immaculate.
Speaking of incredible wine programs too.
Great wine list. And just like fun. It's like you're packed in like sardines. And I kind of like love that kind of energy in a restaurant. I think energy like that makes you want to like enjoy life more, which leads you to drinking and eating more. It's great. You don't want to leave, So shout out Avec. Now on this trip, we had 3 of our meals at Kasama. We had 2 breakfasts there on Father's Day and the day before, like right off as we got off the airplane.
That's why you're wearing the hat right now.
Yeah, those are my people, man. Shout out Jeannie and Tim. They're incredibly talented. And then we had dinner there on Sunday night with Phil, who I think you guys maybe met earlier, our sous chef, AM sous chef. He flew out to be part of it this year. And we went to dinner there, and Kasama's gotten plenty of flowers. They are a 1-star Michelin restaurant. They won a James Beard Award a couple years ago. They were on The Bear, which dropped yesterday, season 4.
Yeah, saving it for my trip.
I still haven't really gotten like that into that show.
It'll be good when you're on a break.
Yes.
It's hard to go. I always find this too, like reading a book, a hospitality book. while in work
Yeah.
is really hard, because it's like, I do this all day.
Totally.
But when you can get to the beach or when you can hang out and put your feet up, it's kind of fun to just dip your toe in and be like, okay.
I really enjoy the show. I think Courtney Storer is like a dear friend of ours and an incredibly talented. She's the food consultant on this show.
Oh, nice.
And her brother Chris is the writer, director, etc. There's a lot of great hospitality people involved, which makes it super real,
Right.
which also can be triggering.
Very.
But I think the dinner at Kasama this year was extraordinary and somehow still felt underrated. You know, it's like it's so rare that you walk into a restaurant that's like gotten the praise and love that they have, and you walk out feeling like, I find this restaurant is still not getting enough praise. And I think that's partly because the food was deeply soulful. You get to that level of dining, and sometimes I think the soul gets removed, but food felt deeply personal. And for those who don't know, Kasama is the first Michelin-starred Filipino restaurant in America, and it operates essentially like a breakfast diner with great pastries in the morning.
In
And then-
Ukrainian Village.
Yeah, in Ukrainian Village, and then transforms into this like Michelin-starred fine dining restaurant at night. And they do it seamlessly and do it soulfully. And they happened to eat at the restaurant at Birdie's like a couple weeks before we were in Chicago, and
Oh, wow.
it was really special to experience their form of hospitality
Yep.
after they experienced ours.
Yeah, I went to Kasama, I guess, last summer. I only went for breakfast. I didn't go for the big meal, but I always like to tell people I went to the one Filipino breakfast spot in a Ukrainian neighborhood in all of America and maybe all of the world that earned a Michelin star. Breakfast was really good. I can't speak to the dinner, obviously, but I'm going to have to go back for the dinner now that I have your recommendation
And
on
we
that.
went to Lula Cafe, which is Lula Cafe is a place we go to like kind of kiss the ring. Jason Hamill is like
Logan
the
Square, that place is a legendary
institution.
spot, yeah.
Jason and his wife Leah taught Tracy how to hold a knife.
Oh, wow.
25 years ago, however long it was. And she still looks at them as mentors. And Jason and Lula and Leah, they all won the Outstanding Hospitality Award last year by the Beard Foundation. And it talk about community hubs, man. Like that place is always packed, always filled with incredible, like it's like the poet writer communities of Chicago, and the food's extraordinary. It's like delicious, simple and humble, but like it kind of like the simplicity, just kind of I think like Tracy's food in some ways, like it disguises how much work actually goes into the food, you know. And I think I'm always appreciative of going there.
Well, real quick, speaking of work going into the food, you guys have just kind of tweaked the food experience here at Birdie's,
Yeah.
right? You were a la carte for the first few years, and now you've evolved into a Prix-Fixe menu. Still some options along the way and supplements. Talk to us about that, you know, maybe choice.
thinking behind it?
Yeah, I mean,
I think, you know, Birdie's had gotten to a point where we kind of knew what we were doing. And I think Tracy and I are like restless people. I think we were like, do we want to do this format of food for the next decade? You
Right.
know? And I think when we started really thinking about it, she was like, well, I because of how busy we are, we can't always use the techniques and put dishes on the menu that I maybe would like to. And I think Birdie's like 1.0, as we always called it, was an incredible restaurant, but it was a formula that had to work based on how big this restaurant was and the crazy amount of volume we were doing.
Yep.
And we were like, we don't want to leave a 5-day week, you know, and feel completely exhausted.
Yep.
We don't want our team to feel that way. And we want to explore what else we can do.
Yep.
And I think, you know, the way our thinking is always, this is good for our team. This is good for us. This is good for like all the other stakeholders, like in our restaurant. And when the answer like aligns with all those things, we say, okay, this is telling us the risk matrix makes sense.
Yep.
And it was a risk to go and be a counter service Prix-Fixe restaurant. We said, like, let's try it. If it doesn't work, we can always go back. And we're still kind of in the experimental phase right now. We're about to approach our 4th menu. So the way it works is like every month, the entire menu changes top to bottom. And it's a 5 to 6 course meal for $68. I think there's still incredible value in the meal. But it starts with like a little amuse. You have a soup course, a vegetable course, a pasta course, an entree, a bread course is kind of an option, and then dessert. And it allows us to kind of explore techniques, Tracy to explore techniques that she hasn't. It allows us to explore hospitality in a way that feels a little bit more bespoke because it's a little easier, quite frankly. And then the last piece of it is Birdie's was never designed to be a restaurant that people waited an hour and a half to 2 hours to get in. And we wanted to reduce that. It allows for quicker decisions at the counter because you're just picking in 2 categories. So wait times are now 30 to 45 minutes instead of an hour and a half, which is just a lot more palatable and a lot more enjoyable. And I think people are a little more relaxed when they walk in than if they had to wait 2.5 hours to get in.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to finally get in with some friends, and we had a really, really great meal. We, of course, went a little overboard and did all the supplements, and you guys picked out some great wines. But yeah, it was so lovely, and I'm excited for it because, like you said, you want your team, you want your chef to have kind of fresh, new challenges, and not just be banging out the same dish 47 times a night.
And you want that for your team too.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that if you want to attract the best, I think it's really important that you're always pushing.
Yeah.
Because the people who are the best always want to be pushing.
Yeah.
They're never you don't want to be comfortable. As soon as you get comfortable, you start wondering if you're going to start falling backwards. And I think, like most things, it's again, there was a decision that we embraced full-heartedly. I think most of our guests embraced, but not everybody did. For a lot of people, it was I like popping in and just having a bowl of pasta at the counter. And we appreciate that. I get it. You know what I mean? When you feel really connected to a place and something changes, it can be a little disconcerting. And, we pay attention to that. And I think, we still allow people, a regular popped in a couple nights ago, at 8:30 after we'd kind of gone through our push. And they were like, oh, we didn't know you were Prix-Fixe. I just wanted a bowl of pasta. We were like, sure, you can have a bowl of pasta.
Yeah.
And I think it's finding the yes in those moments, but also not compromising who we are. And one of the cool things about this Prix-Fixe menu is it's allowed us to build a really big kids menu now. So, it's always a give and take, but what's cool now is we have an actual kids menu. So it's the parents can come in and enjoy a 90-minute Prix-Fixe. 90 minutes is about as long any meal really takes, right? But now your kid can hang out. You can put the iPad on if you want, but they can have a great bowl of pasta and enjoy dinner while the parents are enjoying a course meal. So
I'm glad you're being accommodating. Turn the freaking iPad off. Have the kids be engaged at the dinner table. But that's interesting to hear because my wife and I love this place. I can't always say that about the places that we visit for the Thursday Supper Club. We've probably been here 5 or 6 times, cool. and every time we love the place more than the previous. So now, because we have not been here since the Prix-Fixe set in, we're going to have to come back and bring the kids with because we love feeding them real food too, rather than just quesadillas, pizzas, and hot dogs.
That food's awesome. There were 2 kids the other day. There was a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old. Yeah. Parents were so cool. They were like, nah, they'll have the menu. We'll just split one menu between the 2 of them.
Oh, there you go.
And the kids got to enjoy that whole course meal.
Well, you're a dad now, so you get it. You've evolved your thinking. I saw your son. You didn't mention this when you went to Chicago, but he got his first Au Cheval burger, didn't he?
Ooh.
Yeah, he crushed it too.
Yeah.
Did y'all go to Au Cheval or Small Cheval?
Au Cheval.
Okay.
Yeah, we went
good. Way to go to the OG.
The OG spot. And he loved it. And he's a good eater, but he's a 2.5-year-old. So he's he has moments of wanting to resist everything,
yes.
And
did he go egg on the burger?
No egg. No egg. We didn't. We chose no egg because we didn't want to clean up the mess.
It is messy.
Yeah, and the eggs inevitably end up on your clothes.
Yep.
Yep.
So,
oh yeah.
But we had a great time. Au Cheval was awesome. I was really also impressed with how lovely everybody was at Au Cheval. You go to restaurants like that, and you kind of expect it to be stern. What do you want? Get out of here, kind of vibes. And
Brandon Sadikoff is another one of those guys who has really emphasized the hospitality element to all the great restaurants he has around Chicago.
That's great.
Well, not only is the kid minis here, we were looking for a little bit of bug spray out here on the patio. I was looking at one of the cases, saw a little little toy truck in
trucks
there.
in there.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be growing up in a good restaurant. So
Heck
that's
yeah.
exciting.
That's
to
his
see.
truck.
I know. I knew whose it was. I wasn't going to move it.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit earlier about taking risks. It's a risk every time you turn the menu over. It's a risk to try the Prix-Fixe. These are things that you can always walk back if you realize it's a mistake. But getting good at risk involves taking risks throughout your life, and that does involve a level of failure. Is there a risk/failure that you've experienced in your career as a guy who works in restaurants and now obviously owns and helps to run a restaurant that has helped you get to where you are today? And if so, what was the lesson?
I think the way Tracy and I have always framed calculated risk, right? Like it's not like we're just shooting from the hip kind of thing.
It's not like you're drafting a center from China.
Yeah, that was great. I think that's a great
You like
calculated
it?
risk. I love it.
A calculated
I love
risk?
it. I watched video of that guy all night last night.
Okay.
He's like,
all right. So we were texting a little bit.
Chinese Jokic, man.
I know you wanted.
Whoa.
I know
It's a
you
big
wanted a
statement.
big man.
He's.
I
wanted Malawach, but like,
Malawach went off the board, and you were close. You were one
you know,
away.
we have 5 centers, but I think we're going to trade probably 3 of them in the off season now. But I think you draft for talent, and I trust like Mike Schmitz, who is one of the AGMs for the Blazers. He was a ESPN analyst on the draft board for a long time, but his focus has always been international, and I think he has a great eye for talent. And I think
All right, so you like it. You
I like
the
it.
pick.
I still am. I own a lot of stock on the Scoot Henderson Island still, and I think people forget the point guard position in particular. Just to talk about basketball for a second, it is the hardest position to play in NBA. The schemes are incredibly intricate, and I think it takes at least 3 years for somebody to develop. You talk about Shea. How many people actually paid attention to Shea the first 2 years? He showed pieces.
Yeah.
But it took him year 4 to really pop when he was with the Clippers.
Yep.
And even then, he wasn't an MVP player yet. And I think the world we live in today, people take such short-term views on everyone. But even Jokic, took Jokic 4 years, 5 years to really become the player he is today, right? It takes time. Good things take time. And I think patience is underrated. And I think if you're, when did you guys blow up OKC? It was 15?
Yes.
When I think Russ was when PG was traded.
Yeah, no. I mean, when PG came in, and again, I mean, there was a great article on ESPN about Presti, and that talking about a failure. They got to the finals, and it informed his next build.
Yeah.
He said, I need to make sure that the types of players we're bringing in, because Harden, KD, and Russell were all too big individually for the team. They needed bigger ponds, they needed bigger things, and so he found players that, and part of it's being young, but he took risks. They panned out. They worked out. But no, you're totally right.
And now with the way the CBA is structured, with the second apron teams and your inability to trade picks and things like that, only way to really build championship level teams now, I think, is through the draft.
Yeah.
Especially in a small market where you're not attracting free agents and things like that. So you have to take risks. And I think to answer your question, the biggest risk I think for us was not taking enough risks, right? I think what we were afraid of doing was just becoming a commodity restaurant, another kind of opening, you know what I mean? And I think we wanted to be different. We want to be pushing ourselves. Tracy and I are still, I think, at the very foundation and beginnings of this new era of our careers where we're restaurateurs. We're only 4 years, we're not even 4 years old as a restaurant yet, So I think we're just now trying to understand what is important to us as a restaurant, and how can we take what we've learned here and grow it. Not necessarily just within these 4 walls, but we were everyone was when are you opening your next restaurant? And we're well, maybe we just open this next version of Birdie's here and evolve this idea as we better understand who we are, right? When we opened this restaurant, we would joke all the time, if this doesn't work, we'll just open a burger shop, I guess. You know what I mean? And sell burgers.
No, please don't. We're good on burgers.
But it was like, we get burgers and fried chicken. There's always a market for those two things. And I think we laughed about it. We weren't actually ever going to do that, but it was like a reminder that like we can always fall back on something. But if you start from a place that's compromised, you never really get to understand who you are, understand what you want to do. And I think one thing we've used Birdie's selfishly to do in some ways is like we've gotten to use this restaurant to better understand ourselves and better understand what makes this restaurant work and what makes our team happy, and we've tried to, like the Prix-Fixe is probably the best example of this. But before that, we pop up like every, the first year, I think we were open like 4.5 months or 5 months. Well, the first thing the crazy thing we did was 3 months into our opening, we closed for 2.5 weeks and paid everyone for a vacation. Because we're like, well, the opening was kind of tough. Like, let's take a break. And then, 2 months after that, we completely changed the restaurant and did our own pop-up called Aiello's, which was like a red sauce pop-up that we did that's become kind of like a beloved thing that we do twice a year now. But we just like completely changed the identity of this restaurant 2 months or 4 months in. And it was fun. It was really hard. But we learned so much from that. And that set the table for like the next Aiello's in February, which we were like, okay, we don't want to do a la carte Aiello's anymore. We're going to do Prix-Fixe Aiello's. And then we've done a few more pop-ups since then, and always with the Prix-Fixe model. And we're like, whoa, this is better for the guest. This is better for our team. This is better for the restaurant. And anytime you come to those three conclusions, you start having to ask, like, do we want to do this with Birdie's? And for a long time, Tracy was like, I want to do it. I want to do it. And I was like, no. That's not who we are, not who we are. And I wasn't listening well enough. And, after kind of coming around, she's much smarter than me and
better looking.
And tends to
more
come
skilled.
And comes,
all the things.
She tends to come to better conclusions faster. But, we decided to do it. And we always said, like, if it doesn't work, it's okay. Like, it's okay to fail. When did failure become a bad thing? Like,
Kobe said it. Failure is just the opportunity to learn.
Totally.
It's that simple. And he was one of the best at, I love that Kobe interview after they lost. Was it Western Conference Final?
When he had his hands buried in his...
And he was like, next season starts now.
Yeah.
And it's like, and you get educated by why you didn't succeed, and you go do something about it.
My favorite Kobe, I think it might have been the same series, was he had his hands buried in his head buried in his hands, and he got asked, he was like, you seemed really emotional and like really upset after missing that last shot. And he was like, no, I wasn't upset. I was thinking about like why I missed that last shot. Like, what could I do differently next time so I don't miss that shot? And I think that approach is probably a good way to approach life. But I think Kobe was like maybe monomaniacal in a way that I don't think is necessarily healthy for restaurants,
Yeah. No, that's right. That's right. No, Kobe, Tiger, Michael, there's a fallout from being so myopic on certain things. But for us, for the everyman that is trying to do better at their job or in their marriage or with their parenting or whatever, that didn't work out the way I thought it would. I'm going to go ahead and reflect, maybe try to do it a little bit differently next time.
But I think that like reflection and all these things we're talking about, at the end of the day, they're kind of like grounded in security and confidence, and like, and that comes from the work.
Yep.
So like, I think if we had opened Birdie's 5 years into our career, I'm not sure we have the confidence to be able to take those risks. So, when I always tell these guys, and like, I had a conversation with like a kid graduating from culinary school, they just like hit me up and they were like, hey, I want to pick your brain about some stuff. And I was like, sure. And they're like, what's your one piece of advice that you give to people? And I'm like, take the long view. I think people in general, but I think in restaurants, kind of overestimate what you can do in a span of like 3 to 5 years. You kind of underestimate what you can do in the span of 10. And I think it's really important to like think about that. It's like, oh, like you set these artificial goals for yourself. And I did this too. I was like, I must own a restaurant by the time I'm 30 and I must have this accolade. And by the time, and it's like all bullshit. It's all stuff that you like have made up, or the outside world's telling you that you need. But like one of my mentors, Kyle, was like, don't worry about that stuff, man. He was like, what do you like want from life? Think about that. Like, and then like build your career around that, and I think that was like really smart advice and advice I tried and pass on.
It's a very healthy attitude. And as from the start of this conversation, that's kind of the foundation of what you guys wanted to do with Birdies. All right, last question now. We end every show by getting weekly restaurant recs, food, beverage recs. You're welcome to keep it in-house and just talk about something you love about Birdie. If you want to give love to another spot in town, you can do that as well.
Someplace else because mine's Birdie's.
Okay, well, part of mine is going to be Birdie's too. But what is someplace or something that you've really loved recently?
Well, I'll shout out two places. One is Nixa. We had a great lunch at Nixa down the street a couple of days ago. Where it like the food was just like as refined as it's ever been, and it was like really delicious. And shout out to Sarah Martin Biggie, who I think is kind of like Stacey Franklin. They're like the two most like underrated restaurant people in the city, and make their operations really, really special, I think, for me. But Sarah does this pop-up with Edgar where they cook Persian food once a month at a little pop-up called Friendly's, which is like named after her dad's like a little gas station shop, essentially. It's like an ode to her childhood, and it's freaking awesome. So I would highly recommend if you see it pop up on their Instagram to go there. And then I want to shout out Le Calamar, which is kind of like the new Underdog rebrand. Underdog on South First, to run by a few great people. But Rich Hargrave, who is an incredible wine talent, worked for Momofuku for a long time. They opened with his wife Claudia Underdog maybe a year and a half ago now. Shuttered Underdog, and I've breathed some incredible new life into the space.
Still Korean?
No, it's like Texas French bistro, and the food is awesome. The hospitality is amazing. They reworked the space.
I loved Underdog, and it just didn't catch for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It was such a great space, so I'm excited to see them back.
And they've redone the space, and it feels magical.
Yeah, so that's South First, right?
Yeah, it feels like you're in a movie. Like the way they've set, like even the music is like a soundtrack. It's not necessarily like a playlist. You know what I mean?
Is that where Sway used to be?
No, it's across the street. It's
okay.
The bottom of a apartment complex.
It's across the street from Elizabeth Street Cafe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I've been twice in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And both my meals were incredible, and I think they're probably the best new restaurant in the city.
Cool. That's exciting to hear.
Yeah.
Well, I absolutely loved our caviar service here. The pastas were phenomenal. Dessert. What was the ice cream?
The corn soft serve?
The sweet corn soft serve ice cream.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Oh my goodness. And all the wine was fantastic. So yeah, my shout out was definitely Birdie's. It was a treat to it's nice that our kids are finally getting old enough where we can leave them at home without a babysitter. So it's
how old are they now?
13 and 11. So it's finally getting to the place where we're going to be back out into the world again. So it was awesome to get Birdie's to check the box because it had been too long for us. So it was awesome.
Hanger steak still on the menu, on the Prix-Fixe menu?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Wagyu steak now. It's great.
All right, love that. Birdie's is also one of my recs, as I mentioned earlier. Wife been here 5 or 6 times. We've loved it every time.
Thanks, man.
Also need to give some love to a place up in Cedar Park where we live called La Dosis. It is part coffee shop, part counter cafe. And my wife and I went and grabbed lunch there on Monday and I had a really good turkey sandwich. She had a chicken club. Really great coffee there, too. Look, they've got good desserts. It's the first of what's probably going to be many visits to La Dosis for me. And it's by the people who do taco flats as well over on Burnett Road. So highly recommend that. And with that, we are through another Thursday Supper Club. Arjav, thank you so much for the time today. This has
Thanks for
been a
having me.
real pleasure, a real learning experience as well. And thank you also for serving up such great food for the last 4 years and many more.
Congrats on the recognition. It was well deserved, and excited to see what you guys do next.
Thanks, guys.